Hi, my name is Marina Massingham. I'm the CEO of Aifred Health, and I'm here to talk about our mission, which is to provide clinical decision support to physicians to help them to get their patients with mental health conditions better faster. We have an interesting founder story. So, Aifred was actually founded by four brilliant young students, all studying at McGill. One physician in training, one neuroscientist, second neuroscientist, and a machine learning engineer. They got together while at McGill because they wanted to do a project to see how they could put their heads together to improve the way that patients with depression were treated and managed, both in Canada and around the world. Back in 2016, a supervisor from McGill came by, said, "What an interesting project. Have you ever heard of the $5 million global IBM Watson AIX prize to solve the world's grand challenges?" They hadn't. They entered the competition in 2016 together with over 700 entrants from around the world, not only in health, but also representing fintech, robotics, and many other different industries. They entered the competition. They came second in the first round. They were number one in the world in the second round. And today we are one of the top 10 semi-finalists in the world in this competition, representing not only Quebec, but the whole of Canada. I joined them as a professional CEO in January of 2019, and I added some of my own grey hair and built out the team further. Today we are 5 full-time employees and 9 consultants and extra pairs of hands. In summary, we are developing 2 things. The first one is an area-agnostic AI model for treatment selection. What do we mean by that? Well, there are many areas of disease around the world in which treatment selection is an issue. And we have built our AI model to be therapy area agnostic. So our model can be equally applied not only in mental health, but in other areas of disease such as diabetes, autoimmune disease, and even some types of cancer such as prostate cancer. But today we're focused on mental health, and we're starting with depression. So our goal is to increase patient remission rates in the population and reduce time to remission. We are the first and today only Canadian company to have approval for an ITA from Health Canada for an AI-based clinical decision support system in any therapy area. And we are currently patenting our technology. We have filed for our first provisional patent in April last month. Key milestones to date. We incorporated in 2017. We closed a pre-seed round of 500,000 Canadian dollars in May of last year. We signed a co-marketing agreement with a major telemedicine provider. One of the benefits of our solution that I'll talk about is it is entirely virtual. So we are able to use our tech just as easily in a virtual telehealth solution setting, as well as a traditional face-to-face doctor-patient appointment. We, at the second half of last year, did an ease-of-use study to show how physicians and to learn how physicians would use our tool, and we also initiated 3 pilots, which I'll talk about later. Today, we're preparing for our first US pilots and for an open-label clinical trial. We are raising 4 million Canadian dollars in order to accomplish those goals. Why are we starting in depression? Well, depression is the leading cause of medical disability worldwide. $125 billion is spent in the US alone in direct costs every year. If you add on indirect costs, such as absenteeism, long-term disability costs, and pre-absenteeism, you're talking an extra $90 billion in indirect costs. The nub of the problem really is that most patients around the world will never see a psychiatrist. They will only ever see a family doctor. In Canada and the UK, that number is 90% of patients. In the US, that number is 60%, but it's always the majority. Family doctors are terrific, but they are undertrained in the management of complex mental health conditions. A patient can come along, they can have a great conversation with their patient, but it's very hard for them to understand where the patient is on the disease cycle and what to do next. Adding to that, whether you're a specialist or a family doctor, treatment selection is an issue. There are between 10 and 15 first-line treatments available for the treatment of major depression, but they're all equally effective, more or less, at the population level. You can probably take off a couple for drug-to-drug interactions, but you're still left with a wide selection and no way to tell how an individual patient will respond to a given drug. What physicians tend to do is they work with the drugs that they're comfortable with. So they'll try the first one. If it works, great. Doesn't work, they'll try the second and the third and carry on going. Unsurprisingly, this approach is not very effective. 33% of patients will respond to their first treatment, which means that 67% don't. And even by their fourth unique treatment, up to a third of patients will still not have responded. And that's what we're here to solve. Depression also has a major impact on patients and their total healthcare costs. This is an extract from a study done by Blue Cross Blue Shield in 2018. What you see here is that 85% of patients have one or more additional serious chronic conditions, and nearly a third have 4 or more. This results in increased outpatient visits, prescriptions, ER visits, and inpatient stays for patients with depression versus patients without. That makes those patients much more costly. They cost the healthcare system, on average, more than double of a patient without. Our solution is a patient-physician web app. It can be used on any platform, on any device, and can be used, as I mentioned, equally easily during a face-to-face appointment or as part of a telehealth visit. Patients fill in questionnaires through the app. These are standardized questionnaires commonly used in the treatment of depression today. They then get processed by a clinical algorithm, which processes those results and shows both the patient and the doctor the patient's progress over time. For the doctor, it also shows them where the patient is on the disease cycle and provides information around what to do next. That could be augment the dose, reduce a medication, or add a second medication, depending on the patient's disease state. It could even recommend that they add cognitive behavior therapy, for example. The goal of this improved treatment decision support for physicians is to achieve higher rates of remission for patients and reduce time to remission. What's very important to note is that this is always fitting well within the clinical workflow. And that's the key advantage we have over some other competitors who are trying to do something similar but relying on external tests such as EEG and genetics. So what powers this? So I've mentioned a clinical algorithm. It's coded best practice guidelines available today. It's almost like putting those guidelines in the palm of a doctor's hand and advising them and providing information regarding what they should do based on the inputs from the patient. And that is actually in pilot today. In parallel, we're working on the AI model for treatment selection. That is the same AI model in which we are competing with the global IBM Watson AI X Prize today. That personalized treatment selection for individual patients does require regulatory approval, and therefore we are preparing for an open label clinical trial followed by a Class 2 medical device designation with the FDA and Health Canada. The overall benefits of our solution are better clinical outcomes, so time to remission and better rates of remission, improved support and time savings for physicians, which leads to higher productivity, lower costs for payers, and improved patient experience. We do have competition, particularly in pharmacogenetics and predictive tools, but as you can see, where we bring different areas together is pretty unique for Aifred. We have 3 pilot sites running today. All of those are McGill sites. So one is the Jewish General Hospital here in Montreal. The Douglas Hospital is also here. And we have Pierre Janet Hospital in Gatineau, which is near the border of Ottawa. We have 2 further sites in the US under negotiation today, one in Pittsburgh and one in Boston. What's also worth noting is out of the 3 sites we have today, 2 out of the 3 of them have paid to trial our product. And we've been able to find out quite a lot about how people engage with our product as we've piloted it. So we came in with a pretty aggressive hypothesis of 65% engagement levels with physicians. That's pretty high for a digital tool. What we found was that 50% would use it with all their patients, and actually 90% would use it with at least some of their patients. So we were very pleased with those initial results. Engagement is also important on the patient side, and we found 64% of patients use the platform regularly, which is a very high bar for these types of tools. Our target market is managed care providers in the US and also telemedicine providers, both in the US and here in Canada. It's a revenue SaaS model, so it's a license per patient per year as a Lego brick, although that can be adapted for the needs of different payers. But it's always free at the point of care. We do not want either patients or the physicians to be paying for this directly. We're supported by Jewel, which is a subsidiary of the Canadian Medical Association, by the Quebec Medical Association, and we have scientific advisory board members from Duke, UPMC, and the University of Michigan. As I mentioned, we raised a pre-seed round of almost 500,000 back in May of last year. We're currently raising 4 million Canadian dollars to support our first US entry, to roll out our open label clinical trial, and get our way through the approval process for both the FDA and for Health Canada. In summary, we see a large unmet need with significant upside and financial burden, together with a lot of opportunity for a company such as ours. We're building an innovative solution which is focused on patient outcomes, on time savings for physicians, and lowered costs for payers. We have patentable features to our AI model and a therapy area agnostic approach. So we can apply this same technology in the future to many other large diseases and see great outcomes for those diseases. And we see also potential significant upside in global licensing opportunities. So while today as an organization we're focused on North America, we see great opportunities for our tech in Europe and elsewhere as well. Once again, my name is Marina Massingham, and I'd be glad to speak to some of you who would like to hear and learn more about Aifred Health. Thank you very much.